From a distance, the Hayes family looked like the kind of people you'd frame in a silver picture on a mantelpiece. Sunday church smiles, perfectly ironed outfits, and a story everyone in Tulsa thought they knew by heart: Stephen Hayes, the proud father with his polished shoes and booming voice, ran his restaurant empire like a kingdom he'd built brick by brick. His wife stood beside him in every photo, soft smile, pearls resting neatly against her collarbone, one hand always wrapped around a wine glass. Their son, Brandon, filled the empty spaces with laughter, loud enough to make strangers turn and look. And then there was Susan, always somewhere slightly off to the side, holding a sketchbook while everyone else held the spotlight. The world saw a family with matching Christmas sweaters, a house that smelled like cinnamon every winter, and an empire that never seemed to lose momentum. Neighbors envied them. Church members admired them. Tulsa diners whispered about how the Hayes family represented everything solid and dependable. It was easy to believe in that image. It was polished. It was practiced. It was unmistakably intentional. But pictures have a way of hiding the parts that don't fit the frame. Inside that home, the air felt different. Beneath the cheerful chatter and perfect presentation lived a structure that leaned heavily on one truth. Everything in the Hayes family revolved around Stephen's approval. His words shaped the atmosphere at dinner. His tone determined whether a night ended in laughter or silence. Mom rarely disagreed with him. Her smile stayed frozen in place, even when her eyes told a different story. She filled her glass again and again, smoothing tension with polite nods. Instead of courage, Brandon didn't have to work for affection. He breathed, and love arrived like applause. Every compliment, every reward, every ounce of pride was handed to him without hesitation. A new car at 16. His own section of the restaurant to practice leadership. His mistakes brushed aside as growing pains. Then there was Susan. She grew up believing the smell of frying oil was supposed to feel like home, but it never did. She preferred color, light, space. She wanted shapes and textures, not stainless steel and fryer baskets. While her father lectured her about tradition and hard work, she traced imaginary designs along the tablecloth, dreaming of buildings that belonged to her, not him. She was the only one who dared to imagine a life that didn't fit inside the Hayes family mold. And in that house, daring to imagine something different came with a cost. Every time she shared her ideas, her father barely looked up. Every achievement she fought for on her own was dismissed as cute. Every thoughtful gift she gave was overshadowed by another one of Brandon's noisy victories. The imbalance wasn't loud or explosive. It was quiet. It was steady. And it taught her one lesson young: love in her family didn't come freely. You had to earn it, especially if your name wasn't Brandon. But here's the part no one on the outside ever suspected. While the world admired the Hayes family, something subtle had already begun to shift within it. A loose thread here. A strange silence there. A look exchanged across the dinner table that carried a hint of warning. The cracks were faint at first, barely noticeable, but they were spreading slowly, silently, waiting for the right moment to break open. And Susan, the child they underestimated, the daughter they treated as an afterthought, would be the one to pull the entire picture apart, not out of anger, not out of spite, but out of the simple truth that every perfect illusion eventually meets the person who refuses to keep pretending. And when that moment comes, the fallout doesn't happen quietly. Welcome back to another episode of Revenge Takes HQ, where every story cuts deep and every ending hits harder for more power and emotional stories. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let's get in today's tale. For years, Susan kept her dreams tucked carefully between the pages of her sketchbooks, the ones she hid under her bed so her father wouldn't call them a waste of time. She drew in the dim light of her bedroom, shaping a world far brighter than the one she lived in. And the day the acceptance letter arrived from the art school in Chicago, her hands shook, not from fear, but from something she had almost forgotten how to feel: hope. She carried the letter downstairs the same way someone carries news they believe will change everything. Her father sat at the head of the table with the evening paper open, Mom polishing a wine glass already half filled, Brandon scrolling through his phone with that familiar grin that lived somewhere between arrogance and comfort. "Dad," she said, laying the letter gently beside his plate. "I got in." He didn't look at it. He looked at her. A long stare. A cold one. Then came the laugh. Not a proud laugh. Not the kind that celebrates a child's success. This one was short, sharp, the kind that knocks the air out of a room. "Chicago?" he said. "For what? Coloring books and mood boards?" She didn't flinch, though something inside her tightened. "It's a design program," she answered softly. "It's one of the best." He folded the newspaper with the same care she had used placing her letter. "You want a future? You stay here. You learn the restaurant business. That's what pays bills. That's what builds a family name." Then the line that would follow her for years. "If you walk away from this family's work, you walk away from our support." Mom paused halfway through lifting her wine glass. Her lips parted as if she was going to speak, but she didn't. She just swallowed her drink and turned her face away. Brandon chuckled. "You? Chicago? Good luck with that, sis." And that was it. No congratulations, no encouragement, no warmth. Just a door held open only if she walked in the direction they approved of. Susan stood there a moment, feeling the weight of every unspoken expectation pressing against her chest. Then she folded the letter back into its envelope and walked upstairs, her footsteps slow but steady. It would be the last night she ever believed their approval was necessary. The next week, she packed her bags without fanfare. No farewell dinner, no sentimental speeches. Her father didn't come out of his office. Mom hugged her without meeting her eyes, as though comforting Susan might be considered disloyal. And Brandon stayed in his room playing games, yelling instructions to teammates through a headset Susan left anyway. No money, no safety net, just a scholarship, a bus ticket, and a determination she hadn't known she possessed. Chicago wasn't easy. She worked 2 jobs, slept on a futon in a 1-bedroom apartment she shared with another student, and painted murals for restaurants to cover textbooks. She learned how to stretch groceries into a week and how to make designs on her laptop while waiting tables. She carried exhaustion like a second skin, but she also carried freedom, and that made every struggle worth it. Meanwhile, back home, Brandon was rewarded for simply staying in place. At 16, he was handed a brand new car. At 18, his father gave him the junior manager title at one of the restaurants. At 20, he was called the future of the Hayes Empire. Whenever Susan visited during school breaks, the message was the same. "You know your brother's really stepping up," Mom would say with a tight smile. "See? That's commitment," Dad would add. And every time, she said nothing, letting their praise fill the room like smoke. When she graduated, they didn't come to the ceremony. When she got her first real design contract, they called it cute. When she opened her own firm, her father asked if she could finally settle down and help Brandon with the real family work. Every achievement she built with her own hands was treated like a hobby. Every step Brandon took was celebrated as destiny. Yet through all the dismissals, all the comparisons, all the quiet ways they reminded her she would never be their chosen child. Susan stayed. She visited. She called. She paid bills no one acknowledged. She stood in the background of a family that seemed determined to pretend she didn't exist unless they needed her. But revenge stories don't start with anger. They start with the moment someone realizes just how long they've been taken for granted. And though Susan didn't know it then, her reckoning hadn't even begun. The real betrayal, the one that would change everything, was still waiting in the shadows of her own generosity. It wouldn't come from a stranger. It wouldn't come from enemies. It would come from the people she kept trying to love. And when it arrived, it would burn through every illusion she had left about what family was supposed to be. Chicago felt like another planet compared to Tulsa. There were no Hayes family expectations echoing through the walls, no carefully measured smiles, no reminders that her dreams were cute. In the quiet of her tiny apartment, Susan started piecing together the life she imagined as a child. She worked late into the night, sketching concepts for restaurants, hotels, and boutique spaces, shaping designs that breathed warmth and intention. The city didn't care about her last name, her father's opinion, or whether her brother approved. It only cared about the work she delivered, and she delivered. Her first big break came when a small cafe owner asked her to redesign the interior on a tight budget. She transformed the place with reclaimed wood, soft lighting, and clean lines. The owner's customers loved it. Photos of her work spread online. More projects followed. Hotels, lounges, upscale restaurants. She learned to negotiate contracts, manage teams, deal with deadlines, and take risks her parents never believed she was capable of. By 30, she wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. Her name appeared on magazine spreads. Her clients doubled every year. Her designs were spoken of with admiration in circles her family didn't even know existed. Yet, every time she flew back home, nothing changed. Her father glanced at her portfolio with the same expression he used for cheap napkins. Her mother smiled politely, as if admiring a child's finger painting. Brandon rolled his eyes at her, fancy decorating. They didn't see her. They only saw what she wasn't, their perfect, obedient heir. Still, she kept trying. Every small accomplishment she shared was another attempt to win something simple: recognition, pride, a place, something she shouldn't have had to earn. And despite all the cold shoulders, she gave. When her mother got sick, Susan didn't hesitate. She paid for treatments, medication, specialists, travel, the kind of bills that bury most families. She wired money without being asked, without demanding credit, without expecting applause. She only wanted her mother to live without worry. When one of her father's restaurants needed new equipment, she covered it in a single transfer. He didn't say thank you. He only said, "Send the receipt for my records." Like she was an employee filing paperwork. When Brandon's business collapsed under his own poor decisions, Susan wrote a check for $30,000. Not a loan, a gift. He didn't text a word of gratitude. He just posted a picture online of himself celebrating with friends, tagging their father with, "Couldn't have done it without you, Pops." Not her, never her. Still, she continued to show up, continued paying bills, continued pouring herself into a family that never offered her more than crumbs of affection. Every act of generosity was her attempt to bridge the distance between them. She convinced herself that maybe, someday, they would look at her and finally see someone worth valuing, someone worth trusting, someone worth loving. But here's the truth about families that take without giving. They don't wake up grateful. They wake up entitled. And with every quiet favor, with every bill she covered, with every crisis she stepped in to fix, Susan didn't realize she wasn't building closeness. She was building dependency. They were learning that she was the one who would always answer the phone, the one who kept the lights on, the one who could be guilted, pushed, leaned on, drained. She had become their solution, their backup plan, their silent fixer. And in return, they gave her a chair at the edge of the table and pretended it was a place of honor. The message from her father arrived like an obligation she didn't have the right to question. "Family meeting, Sunday. We need to discuss the future." Whenever Stephen Hayes used the word future, it never included Susan Still. She went. She always went. A lifetime of conditioning wrapped in the hope that maybe, this time, the door would open for her, even if only an inch. She spent the entire night before preparing. She gathered numbers, projections, cost analyses, sustainability metrics, long-term profit arcs, everything her father claimed to value. Her proposal wasn't a sketchbook fantasy. It was a fully realized business plan centered on eco-friendly redesigns for hotels and restaurants across Oklahoma. It could reduce energy costs, boost brand appeal, and modernize the family's empire. She rehearsed it twice, adjusting every line until her argument was airtight. She wanted, not approval, just a chance. When she arrived, the dining room looked staged for a verdict, not a discussion. Her father sat at the head of the table, arms crossed, Brandon leaned back in his chair, scrolling. Mom moved napkins around like they needed rearranging more than the family needed truth. No one asked how she was. No one asked about her firm. No one even acknowledged the thick folder in her hands. "Let's get started," her father said, without looking at her. She opened her laptop, her voice steady but hopeful. "This is a proposal for a sustainable design partnership that could—" 5 minutes. That was all she managed before the first interruption. "You think hotels care about recycled wood?" her father said, flat, unimpressed. "They want cheap, not your experiments." The word experiments stung. It reduced years of professional credibility to a high school hobby. Brandon didn't even lift his head. "Yeah, why don't you stick to decorating houses, sis?" Decorating as if she hadn't redesigned entire boutique hotels, as if she hadn't built her reputation from nothing, as if she hadn't spent years fixing their crises while building her own life. Susan tried again. "It's not decoration, it's design. It cuts long-term costs and strengthens." Her father waved a hand, dismissing her as if brushing lint from his sleeve. "We're not wasting money on your pipe dream," he said. "Brandon's opening a new location. That's the priority." The same phrase he used when she wanted to attend college. The same tone, the same dismissal, the same message. "Your dreams don't belong here." He does. Susan's breath caught, but she didn't cry. Not this time. She turned to her mother, her last hope for an ally. "Mom, you've seen my work. You know this could help." Her mother hesitated, eyes flicking toward Stephen, searching his face like she needed permission to speak. "Well, it just sounds risky, Susan. You know how the restaurant business is. Risky. Not innovative, not strategic, not worth fighting for. A lifetime of quiet betrayal wrapped in one soft sentence." Susan closed her laptop slowly, feeling something inside her pull tight, as though a thread she didn't know was holding her finally snapped. And then, unexpectedly, another voice entered the room. "I think it's innovative," Tara said gently. Brandon's wife sat at the far end of the table, hands folded, eyes steady. "Sustainability is a major trend. Long-term savings could—" Brandon shot her a look that silenced the rest of her sentence. The kind of look that warned her not to speak again. She looked down, pressing her lips together, but that brief moment, that small act of courage, was enough for Susan to notice something. Tara wasn't just being polite. She knew something, something she wasn't supposed to say. The tension thickened. Her father clapped his hands once, impatient. "Enough. Meeting over." Brandon smirked. Mom retreated to the kitchen. Her father stood and left the room like a judge who'd delivered a final ruling. Susan gathered her papers, her movements slow, controlled. Her heart wasn't racing. It was cooling, steadying, turning into something calmer than anger, deeper than resentment. As she slipped her laptop into her bag, she felt someone watching her. Tara. Quiet, still, eyes speaking what her mouth wasn't allowed to. When everyone else left the dining room, Tara stepped closer, close enough that her voice didn't have to travel far. Her whisper cut through the silence like a blade. "I need to tell you something." And in that moment, Susan knew. This wasn't just about a rejected proposal. This wasn't just another insult. This wasn't just favoritism. Something else had been unfolding in the shadows of her family long before she walked into that meeting. Something that would force every buried truth to the surface. And once those truths came out, nothing about the Hayes family would ever look perfect again. The night air outside the Hayes house was still. Too still. The porch light hummed faintly, catching the edges of Susan's breath. As she stepped out with her bag over her shoulder, she was ready to leave the entire evening behind her, to bury the humiliation under work and distance. But as she reached the driveway, she saw a figure standing near her car. Tara. Hands tucked into the sleeves of her sweater, shoulders tense, eyes darting toward the house, like she was afraid someone might follow her out. She wasn't waiting by accident. She was waiting because she couldn't leave without saying what was pressing against her chest. "Susan," she whispered, "please, wait." Susan stopped. She didn't speak, letting the silence do the talking. Tara's eyes filled with something far heavier than sympathy. I wasn't supposed to say anything inside, Tara said, voice tight, but I can't watch what's happening anymore. A beat, a breath, the kind of pause that signals the beginning of something irreversible. It's Brandon, she said quietly. He's been taking money from the restaurants. Susan blinked, unsure she heard her correctly. Tara took another step closer. I found the transfers, she whispered. Hidden accounts, cash withdrawals, thousands, gone. He's been covering it up by faking numbers in the reports he gives your father. The words landed like lead. Brandon, the chosen one, the golden boy who could do no wrong, even when he did nothing right. The one who mocked Susan's career, her dreams, her success. Stealing. When did this start? Susan asked, her voice almost too calm. A while ago, Tara replied. Before your mom got sick. Before the new restaurant equipment. He's been lying to them for years. Years. While Susan was wiring money to keep everyone afloat, Brandon was draining the accounts that kept the family empire alive. While she was paying bills out of loyalty, he was funneling money out of greed. While she was treated like the outsider, the real threat was sitting at the center of the family table. Tara swallowed hard. I told him to come clean. He threatened to kick me out if I opened my mouth again. A gust of wind moved through the yard, brittle and cold. It carried the sound of voices, her parents' voices, from the kitchen window. Low at first, then clearer as she stepped closer without thinking. She didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the universe has a way of revealing what someone is meant to hear. Her father's voice cut through the night. We should finalize the will. Brandon's the only one keeping this family together. Susan's chest tightened. Her mother spoke next, soft, almost apologetic. Susan's always been distant. Not unappreciated, not hardworking, not generous, just distant. A convenient explanation for cutting her out. Her father again, firmer this time. Susan's off doing her own thing. She doesn't care about us. Brandon does. Tara's eyes widened, watching Susan absorb the words. They weren't just overlooking her. They weren't just minimizing her. They were erasing her. She felt something inside her shift. Quiet, steady, like a locked door clicking open. No anger, not yet. The feeling was colder than that, more focused. She turned back toward the driveway. Thank you, she told Tara, voice steady. Tara nodded, almost relieved. I'm sorry, I didn't want you blindsided. But Susan wasn't blindsided. Not anymore. This was clarity, sharp, clean, final. She drove home without music, without tears, without the frantic swirl of emotions she might have had in the past. The betrayal had already happened. This was just the moment she finally saw it. And the next morning, when she woke to the vibration of her phone, the last thread snapped. A message from her mother. No greeting, no explanation, just the final blow. Don't call or come over, we're done. And don't even think about the will, sweetie. The words were cold, deliberate, certain, not written in anger, written in decision. Everything she had paid for, every sacrifice, every bill, every sleepless night worrying about them, erased in a single message. Susan read it once, twice, a third time, and in the quiet of her apartment, she understood something with a clarity she had never felt before. They didn't cut her off to punish her. They cut her off because they thought she would never walk away. But they miscalculated. This betrayal wasn't the end. It was the ignition, the moment that set the rest of her story in motion. And once Susan moved into action, the Hayes family would never forget the consequences of underestimating her. Susan stared at her phone after reading the message. Not with shock, not with heartbreak, not even with anger. Just a slow, quiet understanding that felt strangely steady. Her mother's words burned across the screen like they had been waiting there all along. Don't call or come over. We're done. And don't even think about the will, sweetie. For the first time in her life, The message didn't send her spiraling into questions or self-blame. It didn't make her scramble for explanations or apologies. It didn't make her want to fix anything. Instead, she typed 2 words. Simple, clean, final. Got it. No period, no emotion, no opening for further conversation. She set the phone down on the counter and walked to the kitchen. The kettle hissed softly, a thin curl of steam rising into the dim morning light. She poured her tea with the same steady hands she had once used to wire money for her mother's treatments, for Brandon's mistakes, for her father's equipment. But today, the warmth from the cup didn't soothe her. It sharpened her. She took a slow sip, letting the bitterness rest on her tongue. For years, that bitterness tasted like sacrifice. Today, it tasted like clarity. Susan walked to her laptop, lifted the lid, and waited for the glow of the screen. No trembling, no hesitation. One by one, she opened every financial portal she had access to, every automatic payment, every recurring transfer, every quiet deposit she had set up to keep her family comfortable. Mom's hospital bills, canceled. Dad's restaurant expenses, canceled. Brandon's loans, canceled. Each click was a door closing, not slammed, with precision. Clean lines, sharp endings. Nothing dramatic. Just a woman reclaiming what was always hers. Then came the silence. A heavy, still silence that didn't suffocate her. It steadied her, held her, wrapped around her like a truth she should have listened to years ago. The silence lasted exactly 7 minutes. At the 8th minute, her phone buzzed once. Then again. Then again. She turned the screen over. Notifications began tumbling across the screen so fast they blurred. Her father, her mother, Brandon. Back to back. Their names flashing like they were competing for the top of her screen. Then came the messages. Fast, loud, panicked, tiny explosions across the screen. They poured in like someone shaking a locked door, trying desperately to get inside. Susan didn't move. She didn't pick up the phone. She didn't text back. She didn't defend herself. She didn't explain a single thing. She just sat there, the quiet still wrapped around her like armor, sipping her tea while messages flashed in frantic streaks across the screen. Her family wasn't calling out of love. They were calling out of fear. Fear of the bills piling up. Fear of the consequences of Brandon's lies. Fear of losing the person who kept patching the holes they pretended didn't exist. They didn't miss her. They missed the version of her they could drain without question. And as the notifications kept coming, one after another, frantic and frantic still, Susan simply set the phone face down. The panic wasn't hers anymore. It never should have been. And for the first time in her life, she let them drown in their own noise without reaching in to pull them out. By the end of the week, Susan agreed to meet them, not to reconcile, not to negotiate, not to apologize. She went because some endings deserved to happen face to face, if only to remove any doubt about what came next. The cafe she chose was tucked away on a quiet street in Tulsa. It wasn't one of her father's restaurants. No regulars who knew the Hayes family, no familiar eyes, just neutral ground. Outside, a thin rain dusted the windows in silver streaks, turning the world soft and blurred. Inside, the air carried the smell of roasted beans, damp coats, and freshly wiped tables. They were already seated when she walked in. Her father sat stiffly, jaw tight. Her mother's hands were folded, knuckles white. Brandon leaned back in his chair, tapping his foot like he was waiting for a server, not his sister. Susan approached without rushing. She set her bag down, took a seat, and folded her hands neatly in her lap. Her father didn't waste a breath. "You've caused a disaster," he said, voice low but sharp. "Vendors are calling. Bills are overdue. The restaurants can't operate like this." Susan nodded once, calmly. "That's not my responsibility anymore." Brandon scoffed. "Wow. Look at you, acting special because you rearrange furniture for a living." She didn't look at him. She didn't need to. Her father leaned forward. "You've always been dramatic. But this stunt? Turning off payments without warning? That's unacceptable." She let the words fall between them like stones. I didn't turn anything off, she said softly. I stopped paying for things that weren't mine. Her mother finally spoke, voice trembling. Susan, honey, we're a family. Families help each other. Susan raised her eyes. Families also tell the truth. The room stilled. Her father frowned. What truth? Susan turned to Brandon, not with anger, but with certainty. Tell them. Brandon's smile faltered. Tell them what? She didn't blink. About the money you've been taking. Her mother's breath caught. Her father's eyes narrowed. The cafe noise dimmed around them. Susan continued, steady as ever. The hidden accounts, the withdrawals, the fake numbers in your monthly reports, the thousands missing, years of it. Brandon's face flushed. She's lying. She's not, Susan said. Tara told me. And I've seen enough to know she didn't make it up. Her father turned to Brandon, his voice dropping into a tone Susan knew well, one reserved for confrontation. Is that true? Brandon stood abruptly, chair scraping. Are you really taking her side? She's jealous. She always has been. Susan didn't rise to the bait. She simply reached into her bag and placed a folded folder on the table. That's not why I'm here, she said. I'm here to end this properly. Her father glared at the folder. What is that? A contract, Susan answered. I sold my sustainable design project last month. Her mother blinked. Sold what? A national firm bought it, Susan said, for $1 million. The table fell silent. Even the rain seemed to pause. Brandon looked stunned, then angry, then stunned again. Her father leaned back, processing. Her mother stared at Susan like she was seeing her for the first time. Susan continued, voice level, unwavering. I built that from nothing without your help, without a cent from this family. And I'm telling you this because it's the last time money will ever be a bridge between us. Her father scoffed. You think money makes you powerful? Susan met his gaze. No, walking away does. Brandon slammed his fist on the table. You can't just cut us out. We're your family. She stood slowly, gathering her bag with deliberate calm. I didn't cut anyone out, she said. You did that the moment you decided I wasn't useful unless I was paying for everything. Her mother's voice broke. Susan, please, don't do this. She paused, looked at her mother with a softness that wasn't forgiveness, just closure. I'm done, she said quietly, and I need you to understand that. She pushed her chair back and stepped toward the exit. Behind her, voices rose, her father demanding answers, her mother pleading, Brandon shouting accusations. Their silhouettes blurred through the rain-streaked glass as they argued with each other, finally forced to confront the truth she had carried alone for years. Susan walked out into the drizzle without looking back. The rain touched her face like a blessing, cool and clean. The cafe door closed behind her with a gentle chime, sealing the noise inside. And for the first time in her life, the weight she'd carried no longer belonged to her. A year can feel like a lifetime when everything you once knew finally breaks open. And for the Hayes family, the breaking didn't happen in one dramatic moment. It began slowly, like a thread tugged loose, weaving itself into a collapse no one could stop. The first cracks appeared in the restaurants. Vendors stopped receiving payments. Equipment leases went overdue. Tax forms didn't match bank statements. And eventually, someone noticed the inconsistencies Brandon had been hiding for years. The numbers didn't add up. The accounts didn't balance. The money trail turned into a maze with no exit. The local paper published the first article. Then another. Then a full investigation. There was Brandon Hayes. Front page, bold letters. Standing between headlines about fraud and financial misconduct. The same man who once mocked his sister's career was now exposed as the reason the family empire was crumbling. Within months, lawsuits circled like vultures. Former employees demanded back pay. Vendors sought damages. Banks called in debts that had been stretched far too thin. The Hayes name, once spoken with admiration at church picnics, and neighborhood gatherings turned into something people whispered with pity. And through all of it, Brandon unraveled. Fast, messy, public. Tara left quietly, taking her daughter and moving to Dallas, no fight, no final argument. Just a woman who had carried the truth alone for too long, finally choosing her own safety. The house on the hill, the one with perfectly trimmed bushes and Christmas lights that glowed until midnight, went up for sale, too expensive now, too heavy, too full of memories they couldn't salvage. Her parents downsized to a smaller home outside Tulsa, far from the diners and the restaurants that once made them feel untouchable, far from the life they built on control and performance, far from the daughter they dismissed. Time reshaped everything they valued, everything except the one thing they still refused to admit. They lost the child who had been the only real lifeline they ever had. Meanwhile, Susan's world didn't collapse. It expanded. Her sustainable design project had opened doors she never imagined. Her firm grew faster than she could keep up with new clients, new contracts, a second office in New York, travel that felt like purpose, not escape. And through every milestone, she never once reached for the people who used to clip her wings. On a calm afternoon in Manhattan, she sat by a cafe window overlooking the city. Warm lights reflected off rain-speckled glass. Her tea arrived, the same blend she drank the morning she replied to her mother with two simple words. She lifted the cup slowly. It didn't taste bitter anymore. It tasted steady, grounded, earned. Her phone lit up on the table. An unfamiliar number from Tulsa. It rang once, twice, 3 times. She didn't move. She didn't answer. She didn't check the voicemail. She didn't wonder who it was or what they wanted. She simply wrapped her hands around her cup, letting the warmth settle into her palms. That ring wasn't an invitation. It wasn't a bridge. It wasn't a memory reaching out. It was a reminder of who she used to be and who she no longer was. Outside, a taxi horn sounded. Inside, soft jazz played from hidden speakers. Across the cafe, no one recognized her. Not as the scapegoat, not as the fixer, not as the daughter expected to carry everyone else's weight. She was just a woman having tea in a city she built a life in by choosing herself. And as the phone finally fell silent, a small smile touched her lips. Freedom doesn't always shout. Sometimes it tastes like peace. As Susan sat in that Manhattan cafe, the quiet settled around her in a way she once believed was impossible. For most of her life, silence meant punishment. Silence meant someone was disappointed. Silence meant love was being withheld until she proved herself worthy again. But now silence carried a different weight. A better one. A peaceful one. She looked out through the window, watching the city pulse with its usual rhythm. Taxis streaming by, people weaving between umbrellas, neon reflections shimmering on the wet pavement. There was a time she would have watched scenes like this with longing, imagining herself living freely inside them. Now she wasn't imagining. She was living it. Her phone, still face down on the table, stayed quiet. No more calls. No more demands. No more guilt bleeding into her day. She had finally learned what her family never taught her. Peace is not the reward for loyalty. Peace is the consequence of walking away from what harms you. People often asked her if she missed them. The truth was complicated. Not sharp, not bitter, just honest. She missed the idea of them. The fantasy of parents who celebrated her wins a brother who protected her. A home where she didn't have to earn affection with money, effort, or silence. But she no longer missed the reality. Not the control. Not the comparisons. Not the demands wrapped in guilt. Not the expectation that she would always be the one to bleed quietly while they called it love. She had spent years thinking she needed to prove her value, to show she was worth being included, worth being chosen, worth being seen. But value wasn't something she ever needed to earn. It was something she should have been given freely from the start. And when she didn't get it, she built a life where she never had to beg for it again. She watched the last drop of tea settle at the bottom of her cup, then placed it gently on the saucer. Her reflection glimmered faintly in the window, steady, composed, no longer carrying the weight that once bent her spirit. She realized something then, something she wished she had known the day she packed her suitcase for Chicago. Walking away doesn't destroy a family. It reveals the truth about who was holding it together. And sometimes, letting people face their own consequences is not cruelty, it's closure. As she gathered her things and stepped out into the cool New York air, the city welcomed her without history or conditions. No strings, no expectations, just the wide-open promise of a life she'd built on her own terms. She didn't look back. There was nothing behind her that she needed, nothing worth carrying into the next chapter of her life. And for the first time, maybe the first real time ever, she understood what freedom actually felt like. Thanks for watching Revenge Tales HQ. Every story holds a lesson, and every ending, a new beginning. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.